So how many squatters are there estimated to be in the UK? It's 17,000.
But first, what is wrong with squatting? Are those who squat empty buildings worse, better, or no different from landlords who leave properties unoccupied for months or years at a time? 20,000 buildings currently standing empty in England, alone, I should say. There's more in Scotland and Wales, while 100,000 people in England are homeless. The Daily Mail is understandably outraged that some councils are helping would-be squatters by directing them to an agency that publishes this: the £1.50 Squatter's Handbook, packed with tips for those wishing to avoid paying rent. It also tells readers to enter properties during the day, preferably wearing day-glow overalls like council workers wear, to cite the Human Rights Act of 1998 if gas and electricity firms won't reconnect you, and so on. It's actually been around for years, actually. I mean, I can't remember how many years, but a long time. The paper may be outraged, as are some Tory MPs, but the fact is, squatting is not a crime. Breaking into a property is, but if you can gain access without breaking in, why not? After all, not everyone earns as much as the editor of the Daily Mail, who is on more than £1 million a year. Who are these people that leave buildings going begging? Well, some are foreign investors who don't care much for their portfolio. Others are owned by companies. Some are at the centre of legal wrangles. More are deemed unfit for habitation. Some squatters end up owning their squats if they occupy them for 12 years and no one lays claim. Others turn their squats into housing trusts to ensure other low earners can have a roof over their head. There are many, many sides to this story, but where do you come down, David?
Well, as you say, there's many sides to it, but on the face of it, I've got to say I'm a little bit with the Tory MPs here. If I've got a property that I own, for whatever reason I own it, and it's unoccupied, that's my choice, because I own it. If somebody breaks into that, admittedly without causing damage, or accesses my property and gets in it, I object to that. I think it's wrong. It's my choice to have it empty because I own it.
Yeah. If you were a foreign investor who may have not touched that property for 10 years, just leaving it to rack and ruin, that same rules would apply?
I still think I own it, therefore it's my choice as to who
you
lives
still
in
would
it
own
and
it.
why.
You would still own it, but if you're going to leave it for 10 years unoccupied, falling apart...
But it could become somebody else's. But
well, only if they stayed there for 12 years without you laying claim.
But I can't get my head round somebody getting into something that's mine.
It's
and
the same,
not being a choice
the same with
of
any
mine.
property. If you leave a car for a long time, you can make a claim to own it. If property isn't claimed...
OK, so if you have your, whatever car it is you're driving at the moment, some flash car, no doubt, outside your house...
I don't have kids, Larry. I'm entitled to.
You have this flash car and you, by accident, leave it unlocked. And in the morning, you come in, you see somebody sat in your car eating their McDonald's breakfast. Would you not be slightly miffed?
Yes, but it would be my fault for not locking it.
No, you wouldn't. That's not what you would do. You'd be furious.
If
and then they said,
and
they shut the door and they lock it and they say, no, you weren't in it. So we've decided we're just going to stay in here for a couple of days. I mean, morally speaking, I don't think you should take something that's not yours.
But it's not taking it.
Well, if you're living in somebody's house, no, if you're living in somebody's house, that is not your house.
But,
I mean,
Matthew,
quite apart from the fact that
it's using it and not getting out again when you're asked to by the owner.
But can you imagine if, I mean, I'm in a house and I'm paying this incredibly big mortgage and I am knackering myself to pay this mortgage, let's say, and then somebody moves in next door and they're squatting, I would be furious that I am killing myself and they're doing it for free.
Meet Ben. He is a squatter. Morning, Ben.
Morning.
You all right?
I'm good.
So what would you say to these two?
Well, the vast majority of empty buildings, vast majority of buildings full stop, are actually owned by banks, not individuals. And as Matthew said, corporations quite often registered overseas with no particular interest apart from capitalising on their investment. And doing that often means leaving them empty. It's very rarely about a person who happens to have an empty house that they're not living in. Does happen, I don't dispute that, but it's usually commercial properties. If you want to stay in a squat for a long time, you don't pick one that still has someone's possessions in. That's just asking for trouble. So yeah, they're usually commercial properties, abandoned pubs. There's a great number of those, often owned by other pubs who want to reduce the number of pubs in an area in order to maximise profit again. So whenever the debate on squatting comes up, people always see it from their own perspective as a homeowner. What would it mean to them? But that's rarely the case out in the real world, where there's over 80,000 empty properties in London, over 600,000 empty properties in the UK. And the
But
20,000...
what about the basic moral argument that why should you have the right to live somewhere that doesn't belong to you? Isn't that a basic
Lots of people live
right
in places
and
that
wrong?
don't belong to them. It's called paying rent.
Well, they have had a contract with the person who has said they can come and live
paying
there.
rent, but they still
Very
don't own the
different
property,
thing.
and
Very
they can
different.
still be
Well,
evicted, just like a
How do
squatter.
you square that basic... For me, it's a right and wrong issue.
Property rights are actually relatively new in human terms, and 1 in 7 of the world's population are said to be squatters. The UK has a very long history of squatting, and in fact many towns and cities were built around squatter communities. This is nothing new, and it's on the increase, and it's...
Because the Daily Mail's outraged by this book. Do you know how many years this book's been in circulation, the Squatters' Handbook? It's a long time.
The Advisory Service for Squatters, I think, has existed in some form for 30 years, and that book's in its 12th edition.
But the Daily Mail has got angry, what, yesterday?
I've got no idea whether this is suddenly a story. They point out all the Labour councils which are providing contact details in their housing section for the Advisory Service. They conveniently miss all the Tory councils that are doing the same thing, including the City of London government website also has a link to the Advisory Service for Squatters.
OK, where do you stand on this?
Well, I kind of think if you've got a history of trying to get somewhere to live, and the council's not kind of helping you the way they should be, and if you've got a family, young kids, whatever, and you're homeless...
If you've got young kids, the council will help you. That's that.
Right.
If you haven't got kids and you're a bloke, maybe on your own with next to no money, you're in shtuck. I mean, that's hard.
Yeah, I don't
and
think
the people I
that
know
should
that
apply
squat
to...
tend to fall in that situation, actually.
Yeah.
Single men or single people with next to no money, needing a roof over their head. And if I had the choice, right, between lying in the gutter, if I had to sleep in the gutter on the streets, or could enter a property legally that had laid empty without people's possessions in it, I wouldn't hesitate.
How do you enter a property legally?
Some derelict property where perhaps somebody might have gone by vandals. You can see them all boarded up down the sides of roads where vandals have pulled the boarding off. If I felt I could just go through a window that was boarded off, I'd rather sleep with a roof under my head than on the streets in the gutter. And that's the one I wouldn't hesitate. Wouldn't hesitate. Yeah. What about you, though? What do we think about squatters? Amy?
We're going to go to Fiona online too. She can see why people would squat.
OK, Fiona, good morning. Why is that?
I live in Perthshire. Hello?
Hello, yeah, we got you loud and clear.
OK. We are in rented accommodation, me and my husband.
Yeah.
He is self-employed and works, and we were living up in Strathtay, and we had to leave our property, sadly, because they sold the estate, and there's lots of empty houses around. There are estates, and I don't mean council estates, these are shooting and fishing estates that have got a lot of empty houses, but the lords that own them can afford to leave them empty.
Yeah.
There are a lot of second homes that have killed a lot of the communities up here.
Yeah.
And they just sit empty as well.
But then, Fiona, these people, he says, switching sides, that these people have, in some cases, have worked very, very hard to get the money to buy the houses, and if it's their choice to leave them empty, why shouldn't they?
Because it's not fair in the community when they also want people to go in, like plasterers, they want electricians, they want people from the community to go in and do the work for them. But where do they live? Where do these people supposed to live that want to work in the community? I mean, I wouldn't personally be a squatter, but I understand why people do it because, we want to pay our way, we want to rent, and I don't understand why these people are prepared to just let their houses sit empty and they've got that much money that they don't need to help and put money back into a community.
OK, Fiona, thank you very much. Let's have another.
We've got Jonathan on line 1, who's a private landlord.
Jonathan, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. What do you think, sir?
Well, I've been a private landlord for 35 years, and it's very hard work looking after your properties, maintaining them, keeping them up to date. But when these squatters go in the property, no one stops and think they're going to leave damage, they're going to leave repairs, your utility bills to pay. Why should a landlord be responsible and have to pay for things like that when you've had these people from nobody's just go into your property and just take over?
OK, what would you say to that, Rem?
Well, when I moved into my squat, the owners had deliberately broken a hole in the roof and taken out the windows in order that it falls to pieces and they can justify getting planning consent to demolish it. I had to fix the roof, fix the windows. I can't imagine why a squatter would move into a building and then trash their home.
It does happen. I know it happens because I've seen it happen. But equally, it's worth pointing out that not every squatter does that.
Yeah, but if your motivation is to provide yourself with a home, why wreck it? If your motivation is to weigh in all the metal, the pipes and the lead on the roof and move on to the next building, which does happen, that's a crime of an entire different entirely different thing.
And Jonathan, hopefully you're still there. Let's say, and I hope it doesn't happen, let's say there's a terrible property crash and suddenly, mate, you are skint, brassic skint, got nowhere to live, you're on your own, you've got the choice between dossing down on the road or going into a building where you can see that the window shield or whatever, the boards have been pulled off. You would sleep in the gutter or would you go inside the house?
Well, that will never happen to me because I'm one of these persons who programs things ahead and plans things. I don't expect handouts and things for nothing.
OK, well, I hope you never end up on the streets then, Jonathan. Thanks very much for the call. I would imagine most people that are on the streets would probably say they're exactly the same thing, but that's just not always the way it works out. Thanks for all your calls. Thanks to Ben as well for joining us this morning. After the ads, deliver white lies, harm your children.